Police have one person in custody and are searching for a second suspect following a shooting downtown, which eventually led to a vehicle crashing into an Etobicoke school. Good afternoon. The shooting happened near Sherbourne and Dundas just before 9:30 p.m., sending a man to hospital with serious but non-life-threatening injuries.
Two suspects involved left the scene in a vehicle and were eventually involved in a crash more than 25 kilometers away. CTV's Rahim Ladani has been following this investigation. He joins us live with the latest. Rahim.
Michelle and Nathan, good afternoon. The scene here is still quite telling of what happened last night. You can actually see the skid marks where a vehicle jumped over the curb here on the Westway. The vehicle then continued to travel through the grass for at least over 50 feet before swerving right, crashing through the fence, and then hitting the side of this junior middle school where the vehicle eventually came to a stop. You can see the trunk and door wide open while the hood of this car is crushed and charred, catching fire after it crashed into the side of a school in Etobicoke Sunday night. Police say a man then took off, but officers were able to catch him and took him into custody. Monday morning, police tape surrounds the crash site at the side of Dixon Grove Junior Middle School, with a large portion of the fence still broken. While the suspect was caught in this neighborhood, police say the vehicle he was in was involved in a shooting less than an hour earlier in downtown Toronto. It was just before 9:30 at night when police responded to Sherbourne and Dundas Street East for reports of shots being fired. A vehicle was seen fleeing that scene, and officers found a male suffering non-life-threatening injuries, and he was taken to hospital. While police believe the same vehicle is involved in both incidents, what hasn't been confirmed is if the single vehicle crash was the result of a police pursuit. And further to whether or not this crash was the result of a police pursuit, I can tell you that at this time, the Special Investigations Unit has not invoked its mandate. Reporting live, I'm Rahim Ladani. Nathan, I'll send it back to you.
Thank you, Rahim. A man's facing impaired driving charges after crashing into a parked OPP cruiser. It happened early Sunday morning on Highway 12 in Tay Township. Police say a minivan was heading east when the driver struck a police cruiser. Both vehicles suffered significant damage. The 31-year-old man driving the van and a passenger both suffered minor injuries. The officers in the cruiser were not hurt.
The sentencing process for a Toronto police officer found guilty of discreditable conduct and neglect of duty begins today. Inspector Joyce Scherster went to the scene of a crash involving her nephew in May of 2022. Video shows her speaking with the investigating officer in which she claimed she was only there because she was concerned for her nephew's safety and well-being. At a police tribunal hearing, prosecutors argued it was a conflict of interest. Scherster could potentially face a demotion or other administrative penalties. The mayor joined Toronto Police this morning for the launch of a new emergency assistance campaign.
The initiative aims to make sure residents get in touch with the correct services in times of need. CTV's Mike Walker has been following this story and joins us live with more details. Mike.
Well, Nathan, Michelle, this new public education campaign aims to reduce wait times for 911 calls. Police say far too often people are still calling 911 for non-emergencies, and that's having an impact on how quickly calls are being answered and first responders are being deployed. This campaign, dubbed Make the Right Call, is in response to recommendations by the Auditor General, who found in a report that about 57% of calls don't constitute an emergency. Right now, officials say that is about 3 out of 10 calls to 911. To put things in perspective, Toronto Police Call Center averages 1.2 million calls annually. Last month, the force says the number of 911 calls increased by nearly 3,000. Now, this initiative will include social media campaigns, plus advertisements on bus shelters and on different media platforms to educate the public on when to call 911 and when to call non-emergency lines like 211 for community and social services and 311 for city services. Here's more.
Right now, many people are using 911 emergency line for situations that aren't an emergency, and these lines could be better addressed. In an emergency, seconds matter, and this is why we are launching Make the Right Call awareness campaign in partnership with the City of Toronto. It's to better help Torontonians, we are asking for Torontonians' help. The campaign starting today, you'll see a number of ads, including social media posts and also transit shelter posters. And the objective of our joint Make the Right Call campaign is to reduce the number of non-emergency calls to 911 by increasing the understanding of when to call 911 and when to contact an alternate service.
The Auditor General said because there are a good number of calls that 911 get that are not emergency, it can be handled in a much better way. By making the right call, we are helping other Torontonians that desperately need that 911 call respond to quickly. And we own it to each other to make the right call. And also, if we make the right call, we get the right kind of service immediately, right?
Now, the force says the average wait time for a 911 call to be answered this month is 1 minute and 7 seconds, a number they admit they are working to bring down. But they say there are a number of factors, including the sheer volumes of calls they are receiving at any given time. Reporting live, I'm Mike Walker. Michelle, back to you.
Thank you, Mike. And still to come on CTV News at noon, a multi-billion-dollar class action lawsuit has been launched alleging black public servants have endured decades of systemic racism and discrimination. We'll have those details a little later in the newscast.
But first, nearly all Ontarians are now eligible to receive their flu shots and an updated COVID-19 vaccination.
The shots are being rolled out at doctor and nurse practitioner offices across the province. CTV's Scott Lightfoot has been following the story. He joins us live with more. Scott.
Michelle, those most up-to-date COVID vaccines are available as of today, as you mentioned, in pharmacies and primary care providers across the province. There are 2 updated vaccines now offered for the latest COVID virus variants. They've been available to people in high-risk categories for a couple of weeks, but as of today, they are now available to anyone in the general public. Also available are the up-to-date flu shots. Now, a recent survey by Rexall found that only 52% of adults were thinking about getting a flu shot, but a pharmacist we spoke with this morning says he's noticed the demand for both vaccines has been higher this year than last.
You'll see that with the people who do stay up to date, they're consistently getting like all of their shots. So you'll have people who maybe have, 5, 6, 7, 8 vaccines at this point, and they're constantly staying up to date with it. With the rest, I can sense that maybe for some there might be skepticism, but this has been a pretty bad season. So I can see that there's a lot of people getting sick with flu and COVID, and I actually have colleagues in the hospital who mentioned that a lot of people are sick with COVID. So I think there definitely is a sense of alarm for a lot of people, and so maybe they're looking to get vaccinated again, even though maybe there might have been some hesitancy last year.
And if you're going the pharmacy vaccination route, your best bet is to check ahead with your pharmacy, whether they're doing appointments or walk-ins. In a lot of cases, it's based on availability of vaccine doses. The pharmacist telling us today that you can get the flu shot and the COVID shot at the same time. If you need the RSV vaccine, that has to be given at a separate time. Reporting live, I'm Scott Lightfoot. Nathan, back to you.
Thank you, Scott. Ontario is urging the federal government to make Canada's bail system more restrictive. The Ford government is calling for the criminal code to be amended to tighten bail legislation. The province is recommending several changes, including restoring mandatory minimum sentences for serious crimes. It also wants to remove the availability of bail for people charged with murder, terrorism, human trafficking, and other offenses. The province is advocating for a so-called 3-strike rule, which would require pretrial detention for repeat offenders.
We will never apologize for advocating for the strongest bail reform and the strongest message that there must be serious consequences for repeat offenders, and will never apologize for putting our public safety first. Ontarians are looking to us to be creative and innovative when it comes to fighting crime.
The province says all the measures it's proposing are within federal jurisdiction and is calling on them to be implemented immediately.
Marineland's future remains up in the air after the province indicated it had plans for revitalizing the Niagara Falls attraction. Ontario's tourism minister, Stan Cho, says the province wants to see a major amusement park in Niagara Falls, but that Marineland may not fit the bill. It's part of the government's plan to turn Niagara Falls into what it calls Las Vegas North. Cho says his ministry has not spoken to Marineland, which is currently for sale and sits on 1,000 acres of land near Horseshoe Falls. Cho says the province wants to see more casinos, fine dining, hotels, and mass transit in that area as part of an effort to boost tourism. You'll eventually be able to grab a book at the library every day of the week in Toronto.
Yesterday, the city announced a plan to slowly open the 100 branches across Toronto 7 days a week, year-round, by July of 2026. The move's in response to increased demand, as a recent report says 81% of Torontonians used the library in the past year, and that's a 13% increase compared to 2019.
I know newcomers, the first place they go is to come to the local library to read, to catch up on some of the local news and print their resume and do any number of things and feel, this is how I learned about my neighborhood. This is how I learned about Toronto and Canada.
The plan will go before the Toronto Public Library Board for approval today.
The TTC is outlining its expanded service ahead of Taylor Swift's concerts next month. The TTC says it will be increasing service and staffing, as well as enhancing security from November 14th to the 16th, and again from November 21st to the 23rd. The transit agency says there will be extra service on key routes during those periods from 5 p.m. to 8 p.m. and from 11 p.m. to 1:30 a.m. on show days. Line 1 trains will operate approximately every 3 minutes, while Line 2 trains will run every 4 minutes. The TTC will also be deploying dozens of additional staff, including supervisors and special constables, along routes in the area of Rogers Centre and Union Station. More news in a moment, but first let's take a live look at the city this afternoon. After a sunny weekend for the most part, we definitely have a cloudy start to our weekend. It was brisk this morning, but as we've discussed last week and into the weekend, there is a warm-up coming our way. Once again, Jessica Smith is here with a look at the current conditions. So what are you seeing, Jess?
We get a little bit of everything this week, very similar to last week. A little cooler to start things off. You're right, we have a pretty gusty easterly wind adding some freshness to the air. But as we head throughout the week, we get warmer and warmer as we approach Halloween and then a brand new month before the week is all said and done. But for today, it is a little cool out there. We're sitting kind of in the low single digits anywhere east of the city into that southwestern corner. It's a little warmer, and that includes us here in the GTA as well. We're sitting at about 8 through the islands. We're at 8 through Pearson, but it is windy. Windy, especially if you're downtown or towards the islands. This afternoon, we'll get to a very seasonal daytime high. The wind does dissipate later in the day, but it takes a while. So that briskness, that freshness of the air really isn't going anywhere. But we are climbing back into the 20s before this week is all said and done. Coming up, I'll have a full look at your long-range forecast. For now, I'll send things back over to Michelle and Nathan.
Thank you, Jess. The federal government is asking for help from the provinces to close loopholes being used by criminals to resell stolen vehicles.
Canada's Transport Minister wants provincial governments to crack down on the practice of revinning. CTV's Jeremy Chiron reports.
It only takes seconds and they're gone. Within hours of being taken, many stolen cars in Canada are shipped away and sent around the world, but not all.
Let's treat revinning and auto theft as the national issue that it is.
In a letter to provinces and territories, Canada's transportation minister putting the focus on stolen cars that are being resold in the country after having their vehicle identification numbers changed.
Essentially, it's cloning. So you have a vehicle maybe living alive and well in California. They'll use that VIN and revin it in Ontario, Alberta. It's a problem across the country right now.
The letter from the minister's office calls for participation in an interprovincial record exchange program, which would allow for better tracking of revinning.
And we've seen the provinces and territories step up to collaborate, especially during the pandemic. And so we need to see that type of collaboration right now on the revinning issue, which police forces tell us is on the rise.
According to insurance crime watchdog Equité Association, more than 70,000 private vehicles were stolen in the country last year. In the first half of 2024, auto theft is down 17% year over year, but revinning is up.
The provinces are on.
And this former OPP commissioner believes thieves have shifted their focus.
You know, it's always a push-pull thing. If you put pressure on outgoing vehicles leaving the country, they'll try and sell them more internally.
Ontario says it's working on legislation to counter revinning, but believes it's not the main issue.
Ultimately, what we need here to stop auto theft in our communities is bail reform.
In May, the federal government launched a national plan to combat auto theft. And while numbers are down to start the year, they're still more than double what they were a decade ago. Jeremy Sherrill, CTV News, Ottawa.
Today marks a deadline given to Prime Minister Justin Trudeau to respond to more than 24 Liberal MPs calling for him to step aside.
Get away from that inner circle. Talk to your friends. Talk to your colleagues and really get a good read of the country and do the right thing.
So far, Trudeau says he has no plans to step down. It's unclear if he'll respond to the deadline today. The Prime Minister is also facing another deadline. The Bloc Québécois gave him until tomorrow to pass 2 pieces of legislation or face the possibility of an early election.
Meanwhile, if elected, the Conservatives say they will get rid of the federal sales tax on new homes sold for less than $1 million.
When you buy a new home today, more of the money you spend goes to bureaucrats than goes to the carpenters, electricians, and plumbers who actually build the house. This is insane. The number one cost for a home is government. Government bureaucrats, government taxes, government gatekeepers. 30%, as I said, is taxes, and 39% of all the taxes in a new home are federal taxes, including the GST.
Pierre Poilievre says the goods and services tax adds $50,000 to the cost of $1 million home. The Conservative leader also told reporters in Toronto today it takes over 70% of pre-tax income to make payments on the average home, and 1/3 of the cost of a new home in Ontario is direct taxes.
Voters in Saskatchewan are deciding today who will form the next provincial government. Scott Moe's Saskatchewan party seeking a 5th straight majority. He's promised tax relief and to continue withholding federal carbon levy payments to Ottawa. The NDP's Carla Beck has pledged to spend more on health care and education and pause the gas tax. Polls are open until 8 p.m. local time, with the counting of ballots to begin after that.
A multi-billion-dollar class action lawsuit alleging Black public servants have endured decades of systemic racism and discrimination is in court today. Black government workers are claiming $2.5 billion in lost salaries and pensions because of anti-Black racism in hiring and promotion practices.
The mere fact that Canada has agreed to establish a mental health program, agreed to establish developmental opportunities for Black workers, it speaks to the need for this class action to redress over 50 years of harm in the federal public service.
The class action lawsuit would cover around 45,000 Black government workers and job applicants, as the alleged discrimination occurred across dozens of federal departments and agencies dating back to 1970.
Labor unrest is looming at Canada Post. The Canadian Union of Postal Workers says members have voted in favor of strike action if no progress is made at the bargaining table. The union says more than 95% of urban and rural workers support going on strike. They'll be in a legal strike position as of Sunday if a deal is not reached. The union says it's advocating for fair wages and safe working conditions. It's described the latest round of negotiations as challenging and intricate.
Having an online presence is critical for many Canadian businesses, but it also creates risks when it comes to privacy and data protection.
Now, the cost for recovery from cybersecurity breaches is soaring. CTV's Rachel Crow Spreading Wings has the details.
Statistics Canada found that some businesses paid a ransom of more than $500,000 after a cyber attack last year.
Cyber insecurity is the problem of our time, and it's getting worse. Unfortunately, more of us are falling victim to cyber criminals, whether we're individuals or organizations. The amount of money that's being lost is spiraling out of control.
More than 12,000 businesses were surveyed for the report. Last year, it was estimated 2% of Canadian businesses were reported as targets for ransomware.
Ransomware delete the things, and they encrypt the whole infrastructure, and they ask money to the business. And there's no way to decrypt this whole data. Then sometimes companies just pay all the money.
While most didn't make a payment, 12% did give money to the attackers.
It opens up a hornet's nest of additional risk, and unfortunately, cyber criminals know this all too well, and they're boring in on their weakest victims.
84% of payments were under $10,000. 4% of businesses dished out over $500,000.
What's particularly troubling here is that the dollar figures are growing so quickly, doubling, tripling year over year. Billions of dollars being spent to both prevent this kind of thing from happening and then recovering from it after. And so, we aren't prioritizing cybersecurity to the degree that we should.
Only 13% of businesses who fell victim to cyber attacks actually reported it to police, but that number is up from 10% in 2021.
The reason I can imagine from the company side who don't report is maybe they don't want to give the bad impression to the customers,
Canadian businesses spent more than $1 billion recovering from cybersecurity incidents last year and 10 times that on prevention and detection. Rachel Crow, Spreading Wings, CTV News, Edmonton.
New data indicates food banks across the country are buckling under the strain of soaring demand. There are more than 2 million visits to food banks across the country in March, and that's 1 million more visits than in March of 2019, which represents a 90% increase in 5 years. The finding comes from the Food Banks Canada Hunger Count 2024 report. The report also found a growing number of children are depending on food banks.
It's actually one of the demographics we're seeing a significant increase of since before the pandemic is households with children. So we're seeing over 700,000 visits, or nearly 700,000 visits of those who are children. And that's significantly higher than what we saw before the pandemic. It includes households who are paying market rent. Their budgets are being stretched, and they're facing a harder time trying to meet the rising costs of living.
The report also found nearly 30% of food banks say they're running out of food. They're calling on governments to introduce income policies aimed at providing relief for millions of struggling Canadians. For more on the report findings, we're joined by CTV's Scott Hurst. Scott, what are some of the key takeaways from today's report?
Nathan, these numbers are incredibly troubling. Soaring demand at food banks from coast to coast, not just a few communities. This is affecting Canadians everywhere we look. And of course, that 2 million visits in 1 month alone this year is the main headline. But there are some other numbers in this report that are just as glaring, really shining the spotlight on the affordability crisis that so many Canadians are feeling. Of course, you mentioned 2 million visits in March 2024, but that's up 6% from last year's already record-breaking figure. And as you pointed out, nearly double the monthly visits from just 5 years ago. And so we're really pointing to a 1-2 punch here: rapid inflation and housing costs. You add also insufficient social supports. Now, when we talk about inflation, of course, there has been some good news on the inflation front recently. Headline inflation has fallen to 1.6% in the most recent number, but food inflation continues to remain stubbornly high, and that is 2.4% in September. Some items still carrying significant sticker shock when you go to the grocery store. One example, fresh or frozen beef, still up more than 9%. So once you pay all of your bills, pay your mortgage, pay your rent, everything else, which has also been going up, now we're finding so many Canadians aren't having enough at the end of the day to put food on the table for themselves or their children, which is why, Nathan, we're seeing this rapid increase at food banks from coast to coast.
Yeah, very concerning. So, Scott, who are the largest users of food banks in the country?
As you already pointed out, significantly more children, more seniors on fixed incomes as well, and record number of so-called working poor. These are people who have jobs, who have income coming in, but ultimately at the end of the day, it's not enough to cover all their bills and still put food on the table for themselves and their children. Dealing with skyrocketing food inflation, where, as I mentioned, there's only so much your paycheck can afford. And then when it comes to food, that is where we're finding many Canadians are having to cut back at the grocery store, or as this report highlights, so many more people are going to food banks. And so what we're hearing from this Food Banks Canada report, Nathan, is that they're calling on government to do more financial help to offset rent and food costs, particularly for low-income families.
All right, CTV's Scott Hurst on the rise in food bank usage. Thank you.
Thanks, Nathan.
Turning to the Middle East, Egypt has proposed a 2-day ceasefire in Gaza as negotiations to end the war between Israel and Hamas resume in Qatar.
مصر خلال الأيام القليلة الماضية قامت بجهد.
Egypt's president says his country proposed the 2-day ceasefire in Gaza in exchange for the release of 4 hostages still being held by Hamas. Neither Israel nor Hamas has commented on the proposal. Israel, which is also at war with Hezbollah in Lebanon and has exchanged missile attacks with Iran, has stated it will remain in Gaza until Hamas is destroyed.
NATO's confirmed North Korean troops are in Russia, and some military units have been deployed to the Kursk region. The alliance says the presence of the soldiers is a breach of UN Security Council resolutions and a dangerous expansion of the war. NATO warns that the deepening military cooperation between Moscow and Pyongyang is a threat to both Indo-Pacific and Euro-Atlantic security. The U.S. says North Korea has sent about 10,000 troops to Russia to fight in Ukraine in the next several weeks.
The U.S. presidential election is now just over a week away, and both candidates are pulling out all the stops to win over those voters.
Donald Trump held a rally at Madison Square Garden last night and is facing criticism for the remarks made by some of his supporters.
Under Kamala, America is a sanctuary for criminals and for illegal aliens that are in our country illegally. I will immediately ban all sanctuary cities in the United States.
In addition to Trump taking the podium, the rally also featured appearances from his wife Melania, U.S. House Speaker Mike Johnson, and wrestling icon Hulk Hogan. Meanwhile, a comedian is facing criticism for a comment he made about Puerto Rico during the event.
There's a lot going on. Like, I don't know if you guys know this, but there's literally a floating island of garbage in the middle of the ocean right now. Yeah. I think it's called Puerto Rico.
Comedian Tony Hinchcliffe is facing significant backlash for his comments. Puerto Rican rapper Bad Bunny, who is one of the most popular Latin music stars, announced his support for Kamala Harris immediately after the rally.
Now, here's the thing I love about you young leaders. You know, you are rightly impatient for change. You are rightly impatient. You who have only known the climate crisis, you are leaders in what we need to do to protect our planet. You who grew up with active shooter drills, you know what we have to do to fight for safety in our schools.
The Democratic presidential candidate held a campaign rally in Philadelphia last night, specifically targeting Gen Z voters. Both Harris and Trump will be visiting battleground states before voters head to the polls on November 5th.
And many Americans can vote in advance of November 5th, including Joe Biden. In Delaware, the U.S. president lined up a short time ago to cast his ballot. Biden is voting in Wilmington, where he spent the weekend. He'll return to the White House after casting his ballot. Biden stepped aside earlier this year in the race for the White House that now has his vice president taking on Donald Trump.
We're kicking off a brand new work and school week in a very seasonal fashion, but this cool down, this seasonal trend is short-lived because we are back into the 20s before this week is all said and done. But for today, at least, we're right where we should be, sitting at 11 degrees, mostly cloudy, some sun later on before the sun sets this evening, but that wind is gusty, adding a little bit of a fresh feeling to the air. Coming up, I'll have a full clear long-range forecast as we step into a brand new week and we look ahead to what is going to be a busy one, no doubt, as we prep for Halloween. All that after the break.
Let's talk about the forecast.
Yes.
So are we going to look ahead to Halloween already? Because that's really what's important this week.
We have to, yeah. They're skipping over the rest of the week. Okay, so looking ahead to Halloween, it'll be warm, but we are watching for a little unsettled weather. The system, though, because we're still more than kind of 48 hours out, it is going to change, but just prepare to potentially need some waterproof gear. The good news is it's not a downpour by any means, but we are preparing. But today, we're just holding on to a very cloudy and very seasonal start. Weather is brought to you by the Presler Law Firm. Injury lawyers, you don't pay unless they win. Now, not a bad weekend. We saw a decent amount of sunshine out there, but today, cloudier, and you can see on the water there on Lake Ontario, it's a little rocky. We've got a pretty gusty easterly wind kicking us off as we step into a brand new work and school week. As we head throughout the day, although it feels so cool in comparison, this is exactly where we should be temperature-wise. The wind is just adding that extra kick in there. We're sitting at 8 degrees right now, that gusty easterly wind, 14 through Windsor, but we're holding on to some pretty chilly temperatures right across the province, and this is going to remain at least for today before things change pretty dramatically. Again, very seasonal, almost right across the board as we step into a brand new work and school week. And it's as we head in towards, say, Wednesday, Thursday that things start to warm up. Tonight, we're still holding on to a decent amount of warmth here in the city and anywhere southwest of us. The further east you go, the cooler it is. Now, as we head throughout the majority of our day today, there's not much going on as far as active weather goes. That cold front kind of sits over us. We will feel that chill, but as we head into the day tomorrow, there is a low on the way that will kind of develop and push some showers across. These are the heavier showers likely of the two different types of rain that we're going to get throughout the week. As we head through the rest of our afternoon, again, it's fairly cloudy. We get a little bit of clearing late afternoon before the sun sets, or just before 6:30 this evening. And then as we head through the overnight, a lot of it clears out. Heading into Tuesday, it starts off not too bad. It'll be cloudy once again, but there's that leading edge of that system that will move in through the early morning hours. For us, this is a late morning rain shower event. Thunderstorms through Kitchener as we approach the noon hour. And then as we head in towards about 2 o'clock, the bulk of the system is gone. So it's a late morning, early afternoon line of showers. And then after that, we start to see a little high pressure move in. And it's really quite a beautiful afternoon and into our Wednesday. So we mark the middle of the week, and that's where the warm-up really begins. With the change in the wind direction, that cold front is gone, and we are holding on to a daytime high that is, again, well above that seasonal mark. We do the gamut when it comes to our temperatures this week. So today, pretty seasonal into the day. Tomorrow, 19, those showers roll through. We hold on to a lot of warmth in the evening, 14 for the low. Into Wednesday, 23 degrees and tons of sunshine. Into the evening, sitting at 16. Now, Thursday, all eyes are on that Halloween forecast. We're likely to start off with sunshine. We are watching for light showers through the early part of our evening. So if you're in that window between, say, 4 to about 6 p.m., you should be okay, but we'll keep a close eye on that. And then as that clears out, we cool right back down before the clocks fall forward on Sunday. It's a busy week, needless to say. Michelle, I'll send things back to you.
Okay, thank you, Jess.
Thanks.
The Maple Leafs will be looking to snap a 3-game losing streak when they take on the Winnipeg Jets tonight.
Matthews with his 17th game-tying goal has given it away. Pasternak in front, Stolarz, another stop, scores!
The Leafs are coming off a 4-3 overtime loss to the Boston Bruins on Saturday. Puck drop for tonight's game against the Jets is set for just after 7:30 p.m. in Winnipeg. The Leafs will be in tough as the Jets have yet to lose a game this season. Meanwhile, the Leafs have signed Jake McCabe to a 5-year contract extension. It will see him get paid just over $4.5 million a season. The 31-year-old defender was acquired from the Chicago Blackhawks in 2023 and has put up 36 points over 103 games with Toronto.
The Raptors are set to square off with the Denver Nuggets tonight.
Barnes working with Battle. Great dish. How about that?
The Raptors are coming off a 112-101 loss to the Minnesota Timberwolves on Saturday. Tip-off for tonight's game against the Nuggets is set for just after 7:30 at Scotiabank Arena.
The LA Dodgers and New York Yankees are set to square off in Game 3 of the World Series tonight.
That's driven the other way. Deep right center field. Judge is back. It is gone.
The Dodgers homered 3 times, including back-to-back blasts in Game 2, going on to beat the Yankees 4-2. The victory giving them a 2-0 series lead.
There he goes. Thrown down is in time, and he's 0 for 2 in stolen base attempts in this postseason. And he's in some pain.
And Dodgers superstar Shohei Ohtani left Game 2 in the 7th inning after injuring himself while attempting to steal second base. The Dodgers say he partially dislocated his left shoulder. Despite the injury, he is due to be in the lineup for tonight's game. First pitch is set to fly just after 8 p.m. in New York City.
Still to come, the Canadian Medical Association is calling for a crackdown on sick notes. We'll have more on the efforts to free up doctors when we come back. Frustration with Canada's healthcare system as one patient turning elsewhere for help.
He has lived in pain for a year, waiting for much-needed back surgery, and is now heading to Germany for treatment. CTV's Alex Karpa has the details.
It's been a long and painful journey for Winnipegger Shane Komar. He has waited nearly 6 years for back surgery and decided he can no longer wait.
Well, my best friend Dan Precourt said, enough's enough. You need to get your back surgery done and you need to go to Germany.
Komar said the pain began in 2016 and it just kept getting worse from there. He said doctors have not been able to tell him the source of the injury. A CT scan back in 2018 revealed the need to have 2 vertebrae fused and 3 discs replaced.
I haven't been able to work, so we've had to dip into our retirement savings. We borrowed some money from some friends and family, and it's like I need to get my back fixed so that I can get back out there, get a job, and start feeling like a normal human being again.
Komar will be going to Germany for his surgery at the end of November, but he says the cost is immense.
The price tag for my back to get fixed, not including airfare, is just over $60,000.
Komar is one of many Manitobans who have had to seek surgical procedures outside of Canada. Orthopedic surgeon Dr. Matthew Fredericks in Fargo, North Dakota, says he is seeing more and more patients from Manitoba on a consistent basis.
It's going to be 18 months to 2 years, and they can come down and I can see them the same day, or see them one day and do their knee surgery the next.
One of Komar's best friends set up a GoFundMe page to raise money for the surgery, which is over $18,000. While thankful, Komar wishes this could have all been avoided with a timely surgery in his hometown.
For whatever reason, 6 years later, I'm still waiting. So it's very frustrating.
A spokesperson for Manitoba's health minister told CTV News that they have been in contact with Komar and have directed Shared Health and the surgical team to follow up with him to provide an update. Alex Carpa, CTV News, Winnipeg.
The Canadian Medical Association wants employers to stop asking for sick notes for short-term minor illnesses. The association says the policy creates millions of unnecessary healthcare interactions. A recent survey suggests a third of working Canadians were asked by their employers to provide a sick note for a short-term absence at least once in the last year. The CMA suggests doctors should be spending time caring for patients who need medical care rather than dealing with HR issues.
Still to come, a positive start to the week on the markets as investors await quarterly results from the tech giants. We'll have those details after this short break.
Get Toronto's top stories, breaking news alerts, and watch live. Download the CTV News app.
Tens of thousands of workers could be laid off as Volkswagen plans to shut down at least 3 factories in Germany. Europe's largest automaker is downsizing amid pressure to cut costs and generate more revenue. Volkswagen has seen a decline in sales in several European countries this year. It's not clear how many employees would be impacted by potential cuts. There are growing concerns that a vehicle inventory slowdown could impact Canada's used car market.
Those searching for a new set of wheels are being urged to buy sooner rather than later. CTV's Paul Hollingsworth has the details.
Based on first appearances, this is a good time to be selling cars for a living.
There's a ton of cars for sale. The lots are full. The new car lots are full.
This used car lot is jammed.
I'm very brand loyal, so it comes to what I'm looking for is very specific.
There are plenty of choices for patient shoppers. However, bad news could soon be on the way. Canada's used car market is bracing for another vehicle inventory shortage.
During COVID, there were supply issues with new cars and less vehicles were available and sold. So that means when you have less new vehicles, you have less used vehicles that are coming to the market.
The COVID years represented a dark era for car sales. A lack of new vehicles coming off the assembly line was only part of the problem.
The rental car companies that feed a lot of the auction houses in Canada and the US were down on inventory because they were running their vehicles 2 to 3, 4 times longer.
Post-pandemic, consumers are also changing their spending habits. Instead of choosing a used car, they are exploring other options.
We have a large percentage of the market that are payment buyers. So with the return to leasing, we are finding people going, well, you know what, maybe I will just go ahead and lease that new car.
Many drivers are signing long-term leasing agreements.
Which means more people are holding on to their new vehicles and there are less vehicles again coming to the used market.
These concerns about a possible inventory slowdown impacting the used car industry come at a time when these cars are already more expensive than ever before. 5 years ago, the average cost for a used car in Canada was almost $19,000. Now that price tag has nearly doubled. There is some good news. In recent months, used car prices have slightly dipped.
If you see a vehicle that you like and the price is right, you're probably better off buying that vehicle now and just having that peace of mind.
If not, you could be forced to pay more in the near future because fewer cars could be available. Paul Hollingsworth, CTV News, Halifax.
Quarter pounders are back on the menu at McDonald's locations across the U.S. This return comes after testing ruled out beef patties as the source of that E. coli outbreak. McDonald's says the U.S. Food and Drug Administration believes slivered onions from a single supplier are the likely source of contamination. As of Friday, at least 75 people had become sick in 13 states, with one death linked to the outbreak. The affected products were only sold in the U.S. and never part of McDonald's Canada's food supply. Stocks rose in morning trading ahead of a huge week for tech sector earnings.
Andrew Bell of BNN Bloomberg brings us the latest in business.
Hello there. Here are your business headlines. U.S. and Canadian shares rose about 0.5% in early trading. Investors are awaiting quarterly results this week from tech giants, including Alphabet, Apple, Amazon, and Microsoft. Toronto was lifted by big bank stocks today, but held back by a drop in the energy sector. Speaking of which, oil prices slid, with North American crude dropping more than $4 US a barrel to trade below $68. Israeli strikes against targets in Iran avoided the OPEC members' crude facilities, and that possibly reduces the risk to supply. And finally, Boeing shares slipped just over 1%. The aircraft maker is selling stock to raise nearly $19 billion US, one of the biggest equity issues ever by a public company. The plan here is to stave off a potential credit rating downgrade to junk. A strike, now in its 7th week, is crippling production of the company's main cash cow, the 737 MAX jetliner. That's the latest in business. I'm Andrew Bell of BNN Bloomberg.
Coming up, following the yellow brick road, a BC woman is using the Wizard of Oz as inspiration for a Halloween display in support of charity.
A woman in BC is using her creativity and a classic story to inspire people to connect.
She's turned thrift store finds into a Halloween display aimed at raising money for charity. CTV's Adam Sawatsky has the details.
For decades, it was almost like Deborah Briggs was working in black and white.
It's just it's a mundane job, the doldrums.
There was certainly no opportunity for creativity until, like Dorothy waking up in the world of Oz, Deborah retired.
Oh, it's been just liberating.
But instead of following a yellow brick road, this empty nester started turning one of her kids' rooms into a space for her previously unexpressed creativity.
It's a joy to be able to do that.
When Deborah's not making up for lost time by transforming ordinary wool into extraordinary animals, she's turning thrift store finds and custom creations into one-of-a-kind Halloween displays.
All the girls in the front you'll see are made from shower curtains and bath towels.
Well, this structure was repurposed after a neighbor was set to discard it during a recent reno.
It's now the house that landed on the witch.
And not just any witch, you likely already guessed, but the Wicked Witch of the East.
It doesn't have to be lots of blood and guts and gore. Everything is a story for me.
And the story that Deborah's telling in her front yard this Halloween is about a girl named Dorothy with a dog called Toto who gets sucked up by a cyclone, dropped down in a magical world, and befriended by a trio of now classic characters.
Okay, so here we have the Tin Man, this is the Lion,
and this, the Scarecrow. Although sometimes they're Deborah's now adult kids returning home to dress in costume to help our ruby slipper-wearing heroine outsmart the Wicked Witch of the West and uncover the truth about the Wizard of Oz, all the while inviting hundreds of visitors to donate thousands of dollars to local charities.
The world is very precarious right now, and I think people need to smile a bit more and need some joy.
And if we can connect with our creativity and use it to help others, Deborah says, we just might find that instead of longing to be somewhere over the rainbow, we're celebrating there's no place like home. Adam Sawatsky, CTV News.
That's right. People need a good scare from time to time.
That's incredible. And you know what? Aren't you so grateful when people in your neighborhood go all out? It's just like, yes, thank you.
It's a favorite childhood memory of mine. The people that used to live across my parents would do this whole thing, and I love when people put that much into it. Now, the forecast is a little scary, a little spooky when it comes to what we can expect, but at least it will be mild. We're kicking off the week, again, very seasonal. It's not the sunniest out there, but still okay to spend some time outside. But we will hold on to a pretty breezy easterly wind. Now, temperature-wise, it's warmer into that southwestern corner. Windsor's at 14. We're sitting at 8. But anywhere east of us, it is a little bit chilly. So if you're traveling today, a layer or two, a good idea. Now, as we head into the next couple of days, it is an extremely busy week. So into the day tomorrow, we start off the day with a little cloud cover. We're watching for some showers late morning, early afternoon, and then it's gone. But temperature-wise, this is where we start to warm up. We're sitting at 19 for the high. Into Wednesday, the sunniest and warmest day of the week, likely at 23. Into your Thursday for Halloween, that rain timing, we will watch it very closely. It is likely into the evening, but we'll keep an eye on when it's going to impact our trick-or-treaters. And then we have our clocks falling back on Sunday. So it's not too bad. It's a busy week, though.
Yeah, lots going on. Thank you, Jess. And that is CTV News at noon. Remember, you can get Toronto's breaking news all day long on CP24 and at our website, ctvnewstoronto.ca.
For Jessica Smith and the whole team here, have a pleasant afternoon. I'm Michelle Dubé.
And I'm Nathan Downer. Be sure to join us later for CTV News at 5 and 6. Have a great afternoon.